Anyone for the citizens forum?
Either. I don't have either of them.
Just a working session.
A little chilly?
Yeah.
Those are, that's the board, the regular board, you need more working session.
We need
Here.
regular
My
board.
battery's just, I had it in the truck today. Thank you. We need more working session.
Who needs a working session agenda? You want to have one?
I can share.
You're good?
I'm good.
You guys have one of these? I think Danny made a copy for everyone. But no, you guys don't have one.
For the actual board? Do you need that stuff?
And once again, any public citizen forum? Going once, going twice, and we'll go into the reports. Go with the fiscal year 19 audit report. Eddie Bailey? Ide? Okay.
What's the best spot for me to sit and present? Okay.
You gotta turn it on, maybe.
All right, thank you. Well, I'm Luke Evenson. I'm from the firm Ide Bailey. I'm the audit manager for the school district this year, and today we'll be presenting the financial results and the audit results from the audit for the fiscal year 2019. So that covers July 1, 2018 to June 30th of 2019. So that's a few months have passed since then, but we do have the audit finalized and submitted to the state. The state deadline is approaching, so we got it done in time and submitted, so everything is good on that end. But what I'll be presenting today is the executive summary. It's the packet, smaller of the two packets I handed out with the picture of the cute kid on front. Don't worry, it's not me. Somebody accused me of that, and I was not that cute when I was a kid. So if you guys want to open up to the executive summary, that's where we'll start. So first and foremost, Ide Bailey is hired to come in and audit the financial statements for the district. That is our main purpose. We come in and give an opinion on whether or not the financial statements are quote-unquote clean. Our terms are unmodified, but for presentation purposes, I'll say clean. And we did give an unmodified and a clean audit opinion on the financials. So what that means is that the financial statements have been prepared using United States generally accepted accounting principles. There's not any material misstatements. They are clear and accurate. So that's what you want when an audit is conducted. We do not give that type of opinion on all school districts that we do audit. So keep that in mind. That is the highest and cleanest audit opinion that we can get. So with that being said, the audit opinion is merely our professional opinion based on whether the financial statements are in accordance with those accounting pronouncements and are fairly presented. So that is a good thing, positive thing to have that unmodified opinion on the financial statements. With that being said, we did give the unmodified or clean audit opinion. So if you flip over to the next couple of pages, we did have some audit findings that are listed on the next couple of slides. The first four are under the financial statement audit findings. We had segregation of duties, which merely means we do not have enough office personnel to properly segregate each of the accounting functions. Very common for school districts to have that as an audit finding due to district size staff and just the cost and benefit of adding an extra staff to eliminate an audit finding isn't always the, doesn't always have the most benefit to the taxpayers or the school district. The second one is material audit adjustments, basically meaning we had some adjustments that we made and identified during our audit. Again, very common for an audit firm to give that as a finding for a school district. And the third one, the preparation of financial statements. This is basically just to cover the audit firms, quote unquote. We help prepare the financial statements, which we do for 98% of our school districts that we audit. And we have 70 districts in Minnesota that we do audit. So I think 69 or 68 of them, we do have that as a finding as well. The fourth one, improper completion and retention of employee personnel forms. There was some missing documentation for some personnel items that we were trying to test for. So that was issued as a finding as well.
What would some examples be?
I believe it has to do with maybe like an I-9 when we were trying to test for some long-term liabilities. An employee, we couldn't get our hands on an I-9 to represent the proper hire date of an employee, as that hire date gets factored into one of the pension liabilities.
Because like, depending on how long ago it was,
Exactly.
that might not even exist.
Exactly. Or we couldn't get our hands on any documentation to get ourselves to not have a finding. So we couldn't find any documentation to support a hire date. It was in the accounting system, but we didn't have any backup that was, maybe signed by that employee. So if we were to get something signed by that employee for next year, and then they would say, yeah, I was hired on September 4th of 1973, we would deem that as proper backup. So that's what that finding represents.
Just out of curiosity, was it a long time ago employee hire or relatively like within 10-year type hire?
No, I don't have that in front of me.
Okay, I was just
It was
curious.
It was a
been
long.
in place here for
Okay,
several years.
okay.
And there was a new pension liability added last year on the financial statements. So this has been kind of a common finding, especially for those longer term employees. They've been hired for 30 years. It's been turnover of staff, and just that documentation sometimes is routine. So in the grand scheme of things, not a very large deal to the audit, but something that we have to note per standard. The other findings we did have were under the student activities heading. This is one of the areas we do have quite a few findings in for many school districts. So the fact that we do have findings here, you guys aren't alone, but we had lack of proper authorization for expenditures for student activity fund. Basically, there wasn't a disbursement did not have the proper invoice approval or the required signatures on it before that disbursement was made. We also had inactive student activity accounts. There was a couple student activity accounts that had no activity during the year. If they have no activity, they're supposed to either have a plan for what we're going to do with that balance, if that balance is going to continue or if we're going to eliminate it. That is also one of our findings for the student activities. Very easy to remediate that for next year. And the other one is funds remaining in the graduated class. The graduating class for 2019 had a fund balance as of September 1st. Per the student activity guidelines, that is supposed to be somehow transferred out or eliminated before September 1st of the next fiscal year. So that graduating class is long gone and graduated, and they still have a balance. So we need to somehow get rid of that or transfer that balance per the student activity guidelines. We can work with Crystal and staff and whatnot to help for 2020 and how to eliminate those findings for the 2020 audit. The last finding we did was a Minnesota legal compliance, as there is no sealed bids or quotations obtained for the purchase of, I believe it was playground equipment. Anytime there is a purchase over $25,000 to a single vendor, we should be soliciting quotes, or at least attempting to try to solicit quotes from numerous vendors. It's more of a Minnesota legal compliance to ensure there's no bid rigging or things like that, and to make sure that the school district has the best value for their money. So that was also the first finding under the Minnesota legal compliance area.
Is the 25,000 a state mandated number?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
That was going to be my exact question.
I know we self-impose on some other things, you know, where we have to, like, I think it was, we just did one, we just moved it up to 100,000 or something.
So there were some findings, but the overall, the overall audit opinion, again, was clean. We did have some things we slapped you on the wrist on. And if you have questions on those, please feel free to reach out. But that covers the audit results. And
One more question. So you mentioned that kind of casually, but you said you can help Crystal. Is that part of the audit payment that we're making to you, is that you step in and say, okay, Crystal, this is how you rectify that?
So, we have independence guidelines that we have to stand by. We can't make management decisions, but we can certainly ask questions. If Crystal has a question on, hey, what do I do with this student activity balance? It's August, we need to get rid of this balance. It's from the graduating class. We can say, well, we work with a lot of school districts and we can help you. Okay, we need to transfer this. We can either transfer it to the junior class, we can spread it across all the activity funds, but we need to get rid of it by that September 1st deadline. So
Okay.
we can certainly answer questions. Yes, that is well within the scope that we can assist with that. Any other questions on the findings? Okay. If we want to move on now, my presentation will be more tailored towards the financial statements and the financial condition on which the district is under as of June 30th, 2019, but also for the previous years that were audited. So if we flip over to the page that has the label cash and investments, this is a simple overview of what was the cash and investment balance as of June 30th for 2019, and then the subsequent or the previous 9 years. So you can get a feel for where the district has been at with the cash balance as of that June 30th date. One thing I do want to note is from 2019 and probably dating back to 2013, we see a similar structure of our cash and investments. Now in 2013, there was a pretty big change in how state aid payments were received. I don't know if anyone was on the board from here back then, but in 2012 and previous, the state remitted only 70% of the district's revenue during the year and then waited for that other 30% after the fiscal year. Well, in 2013, they changed that to be more of a 90 to 10 ratio. So you get 90% of your funding during the year and 10% after the year. So you can see how that positively affected the cash balance of the school district in receiving all of that state aid payment during that fiscal year instead of having to wait until after the fiscal year. And that change was mainly due to, budget reasons. If you go back to 2012, there was a state shutdown with the budget, and so that's kind of why some of those numbers have changed for the cash investments over time. If we want to move on to the general fund, the next slide we have shown as the ADMs served. One of the main drivers for the school district from revenues and in expenditures is the number of students you have. And ADM stands for average daily membership. It's basically just a student headcount number that's averaged throughout the fiscal year. So if we look for 2019, our ADM served, or our student headcount number, was 463. Now that's an average throughout the 9-10 month school district year. So you might fluctuate, a few students here or there, plus or minus, from September to June. But that number is increased from 2018, which was 454. So with that being said, the main driver of revenues and expenditures is student numbers. If we flip to the next slide, or the next page, we show the budget to actual for the district. And this is for just the general fund. And what we're trying to show on this page is the revenues and the expenditures for the general fund, so the funds coming in as well as the funds going out, and then comparing to what you guys approved in that final budget. So that final budget is in that second column. The actual audited figures are the third column. And then on the far right, we have the variance with the final budget. So what was the difference between what you guys approved for your budget versus what actually happened. Couple items that I want to note where you do see some large variances with the budget. If you look on the state sources line item, we had a variance with the final budget of $291,000. Now we budgeted 5.1 million and show close to 5.4 million in actual revenues. One thing that is commonly not budgeted for, and nothing that I'm going to fault the board for, but is the Teacher Retirement Association and the Public Employee Retirement Association, the pension plans. Basically, those pension plans got direct aid from the state of Minnesota. And that direct aid went from the state to the pension plan. The district didn't see a dime of it into your bank account. However, because of the wonderful governmental accounting rules, we're required to record it as revenue on your books. So that is one reason why we have it recorded as revenue. However, you guys didn't see any of that money into your district and very likely didn't budget for it. Now, hardly any of our districts budget for it. It's a very tough number to predict every year as it's based on actuaries doing studies every year. So I don't recommend doing that, a budgeted item for it, but just know that this can cause a variance in your budget to actuals every year. So that's the reason why we had that large variance in that state sources number. So I wanted to explain that because that was just about $200,000. So if you take that $200,000 away from that $291,000 variance, we're actually pretty close with our final budget to our actual.
So what's the offset then?
The offset is then in the regular instruction. We also are recording that as an expense in the regular instruction. So typically we would see that as a large negative variance in that portion. So it looks like we had that recorded there, but we would have come in under budget in regular instruction line item without recording that direct aid contribution required by governmental standards. So if we look down to the very bottom of the slide, we had a net change in fund balance in the general fund. After transfers and other financing sources, we had a positive $354, which means we had that much more in revenues than we did expenditures. So we increased our fund balance, which is at about 1.9 million at the end of fiscal year 2019. On the next slide, we have some descriptions overall what a positive fund balance can do for a district. I'm not going to go into too much detail, as you probably all are very well aware of having a positive fund balance for a school district can be a good thing. So I will move on to the next page, which shows the changes in fund balance. And the changes in fund balance represent what were our balances as of last year, the end of the audit, or the beginning of this year's audit for the several different categories of our fund balance versus the end of year balances. So with that net change of $354 increase, we did increase our fund balance slightly, but you can see there are some swings in those fund balance categories from the non-spendable, the restricted fund balances, committed, assigned, and unassigned fund balance. One thing I do want to note on here is the restricted fund balances are restricted by the state. So if you see restricted for health and safety, those dollars are specifically supposed to be spent next year on health and safety. You see a zero in that category, so we don't have any dollars next year to spend in that specific restriction. Now that differs from our unassigned, which in our unassigned we had an ending fund balance of $1,295,854. Now those are unrestricted dollars. Now you can't spend them on, it's not a slush fund, but you can spend them on whatever is in state compliance and those reasons, but they can be spent in whatever area that the district deems to spend it on. So those dollars are a little more flexible. On the next slide, we show the fund balance categories and some of the definitions on what those fund balance categories represent. This is straight from the governmental accounting standards. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this page, as it doesn't pertain to you guys specifically, but it just shows what the different categories are for fund balance, and kind of like I alluded to on the previous page, where can we spend some of those dollars in the future. So if we flip onto the total fund balance graph, this is just an overall high-level view of where our fund balances have been for the last 10 years. For the several different categories are each a different color, which shows the unassigned fund balance just short of $1.3 million. And this can just really be a good analysis of the operations of the general fund and some of the swings that it can have from year to year, but overall a big picture that we're showing for 10 total years. If we want to flip to the next page, now we'll get into, we're talking a lot about fund balance, and the main number that we focus on and want to focus your attention on is that unassigned and unrestricted fund balance. So what we've included here on this page is recommendations regarding our fund balance, and what are some other organizations' recommendations on where your fund balance level should be at. So if you look on the top of the page, we have a recommendation from the state auditor. Now this is for generally all governments, not just school districts, but also cities, counties, and whatnot. But they try to shoot for a unrestricted fund balance of 35 to 50% of operating funds. Now what that means I'll get into in a short bit, but if we look down below, the district has your own fund balance policy, and that says no less than 25% of our annual budget. So what that means is, do we have 25% of our annual operating expenditures included in that unrestricted fund balance number? So that is the goal, that 25%. So if we keep that in mind and we flip on to the next slide, we can see where we measure up in comparison to what our policy was. So if we look for 2019, which is that far right two columns, 2019, the unrestricted fund balance, which includes the assigned and the unassigned, we were at 21.8, and for the unassigned, just the unassigned, we're at 19.1%. So again, that represents what are our unrestricted dollars in comparison to what we annually spend in the general fund. Now one thing I do want to note that definitely is not a part of the audit, but 25% is probably a little bit on the higher end that I generally see. Most districts tend to be in that 10 to 20% range for their policies. You guys do have a policy at 25%, so we did fall a little short of that, but I would say, in my opinion, 25% is probably on the higher end of most districts' policies that they do have. So. And that 25% is completely a board decision and discretion on where you guys want to set that unrestricted, that reserve goal that you guys want to set for yourself. So typically what this will show is, you guys are right at 19%. You guys can run about 2 months without taking in $1 and just spending all of your reserves. You could run for 2 months. So typically we see that number from 2 to 3 for most of our districts, 2 to 3 months. Now with that, that's a little bit more in-depth coverage of the general fund. We do have some graphs here on some of the other funds within the district. The first being the Community Service Fund. And what we're showing here on this graph is what is the ending fund balance in the Community Service Fund for each of the last, looks like 8 years here, from 2012 all the way to 2019. So it looks like we did have a positive fund balance in the community service fund at the end of fiscal year 2019. We did have a transfer from the general fund of $222,000 to result in a positive fund balance of $9,000. But the main driver of that was that transfer from the general fund for $222,000. On the next slide, we show the food service fund. And again, these are the ending fund balances for the food service fund for the last 10 years. The food service fund is built for what it sounds like, the delivery of food, and not just lunch, but breakfast, snack, after school meals to students, and the costs and the revenues associated with those. We did have a positive fund balance in the food service fund, and we did not have any transfers into that fund. So as you can see, we do have a positive fund balance in the food service fund at the end of the year. The number, or the line on the top graph in maroon that you see, is the maximum fund balance for the district. Per Minnesota Department of Ed guidelines, they do not want a food service fund to be charging a lot more for their lunch and breakfast money, or lunch and breakfast meals, than we're actually paying out to charge students. So we don't come close to what that maximum fund balance is. So that is a positive thing, that we don't have too much fund balance in here. Otherwise, the state will start scrutinizing it a little bit more. But we also did not have any transfers into the food service fund this year. So self-sustaining in 2019. And then finally, on the last page is just the debt service fund. Basically, the debt service fund is to take in revenues mostly from property taxes to meet the needs of the debt service payments and interest payments during the year. And we do have a positive fund balance just north of $200,000. So we were able to meet those debt service payments in the current year, and we do have some reserves left over. With that said, that is the end of the formal presentation. If anyone has a question about the audit or some of the numbers that we did go over, I'd love to take them.
Sounds like Crystal and the administrative department's doing their job.
They can keep things clean and organized, so we can come in and go through the books in pretty good detail. So that's a good thing. And then from what from 2 years ago, I believe in 2017, you guys did receive an unqualified opinion on, I think, some liabilities that were recorded, where basically the auditor couldn't get back up, or just did not feel comfortable on giving that clean audit opinion on that portion of the audit. So yeah, definitely clean things up since then. That's a good thing.
In terms of budgeting for retirements, that was something that I think was pushed on us by the state about 5, 6, 7 years ago. Does that make sense? We didn't have to be accountable before that. Is it far enough in the future now that we can just put an average in there? Is that what we look at and make that happen?
You certainly could try to do that. So one thing, if you want to go year to year, that retirement number it's a floating target every year. If you look at the teacher retirement pension liability this year, it was almost half for all school districts of what it was in 2018. It's all based on actuarial information, the investments they can make on the contributions that teachers are making on an annual basis. You could try to average it out for that direct aid budget, but I don't know if I would recommend it. I would maybe just keep it in the back of my mind to say, okay, this is going to be a difference between what actually is recorded versus what we budgeted. And as long as the board is aware of it, that's that difference. We're not throwing numbers out at the window and trying to budget. We actually know there is a difference here, and that's why that difference exists, rather than average it out and try to guess. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, it just seems like sort of a knee-jerk reaction way to handle it where, we retire 5 teachers in a small school like this, and you just take a beating on your unassigned fund balance, for instance. Right, so now if we did that this year, and we're at, what are we at, 19%, you drop that by a third.
True, and like I said, it's a hard target to hit. Some school districts do budget for it on an annual basis, and it's just kind of how they want to do things, so certainly wouldn't be against any rules or regulations if you did want to budget it on an annual basis. Something that could be done.
Can you tell me what that adjustment was? It's probably in the audit report.
Yes, I certainly can. I think I said it was close to 200,000.
That's what I was thinking you said.
It was, let me find the page. It was $187,000 this
Okay.
year.
What page is that on?
It's on, I have it as page 10, but I think my page 9 on your guys. It's in the actual, I'm sorry, you're looking at the audit. Now you're putting me on the spot here.
Lynn, can you tell the English major what you're asking about in terms of an adjustment?
No.
Well, they did an audit adjustment
Is it page 50?
that
that right?
increased the salaries, it increased the revenue and the salaries for the pension amount of the value of the pension, right? That's a valuation of the pension.
Exactly.
It has nothing to do with the retirements, right? Or
It's a
does it?
valuation, yes, correct. It has
Okay.
nothing to do with, I'm sorry, it does have nothing to do with the retirements, but it has to do with basically, looking at your employee base now, and all of the state employees that are in the plan, what is your share and what is the unfunded amount of that liability?
Or I shouldn't say it does not have a direct correlation.
Right, so if you have 4 or 5 teachers retiring next year, the liability, basically, it doesn't really swing for you guys any different if you have 5 teachers retire this year versus 0, because it's a percentage of the total state pension plan is how that works. And we could get very in-depth on how that is accounted for and how it is valued. But like I said, it's a very confusing matter on how that is recorded on your books.
You understand it, Lynn?
I kind of do. It's kind of above what I, would ever calculate.
That's why actuaries make
That's why actuaries make a lot of money. Because there's so many, I would never attempt to do that. We would do, because there's how many pages are dedicated to that? Like 5 or 6 pages in here are dedicated to how that's done, right?
At least, yes.
Yeah. I don't know exactly, but
That could be some good late bedtime reading for you.
yeah.
Go to sleep quick, huh?
But that's looking at retirement though, but Tim, were you talking more about like sick leave payouts or the payouts that?
Yeah, it was the payouts at the end is actually what he was
Yeah.
referring
You
to.
weren't really talking
Yeah,
about,
that-
you
I
weren't
think
really
that's-
talking
He
about
was talking
where
about
this
like,
pension adjustment is just for the
Okay.
pension.
Yep.
And I think there's 170,000 reserved for future retirement.
Is that right? Okay.
I
that-
think.
that would be for the payout.
Right, that
Yeah.
would be for the payouts that the school would actually have to do.
Okay.
So I completely misunderstood your question.
Yeah.
Went down a different road.
Yeah,
Yes, you guys have a committed for severance
yeah,
for 170,000. Yes, that would be a big swing in your fund balance on an annual basis if you did have retirements and then have to pay out that severance to teachers or just general employees. As far as budgeting for it, your guess is
but
probably
I think
as
you
best as
do
any.
budget, you do an estimate for budget every year, don't you? Yeah. Yeah,
So we had
I
0.
think you do budget for that, but you don't budget for the pension actuarial change.
Correct.
Okay.
They're kind of two
I
different
understand
things,
that.
yeah,
I think one year we didn't budget, wasn't in the budget, and we got caught.
yeah.
So for the severance, couldn't you just kind of budget without having the notification from the teachers? Look at, okay, these are the number of teachers who are eligible to retire.
Yep.
So we'll make these, you could budget that they're gonna retire and whether they do or don't, but at least, okay.
You have an
certainly could.
idea, kind
Yeah.
of,
That's what we do, I think that's
Yeah.
170
Yeah.
currently.
So I see that didn't change, that committed for severance didn't change from
Yeah.
last year to this year. So were there no teachers that did retire in fiscal 19?
Boy, that was well timed, Crystal.
No, 'cause
Brenda
Jeff's
retired.
wife did, yeah.
Commitment.
So were there some
We had
payouts
one.
from that severance
Mhm.
amount?
yeah.
Okay.
But usually it doesn't get reduced, usually that just, I may be speaking out of turn, but you didn't reduce that 170 when you did those payouts, right? You just leave it in there for the
that always
next year.
stays,
That's a
in case
constant.
we ever go like, we're no
Crazy.
longer here, we still have $170,000 to pay out to
Uh-huh.
employees.
Cause that gets rolled into the, like that salary and benefits lines and the, yeah.
And when you try to, I see your writing, so I'm trying to be patient with the question. When you try to try to talk us off the ledge of 25% in terms of unassigned fund balance, do you see the smaller schools tend to keep the higher fund balances? Is that, I think that's strategically what we're looking at. We're not a Blaine that has a sort of steady flow of income and a predictable student rate, that type of, an ADM number. So
You're exactly right. So in some of the larger schools that we do audit, they're generally around that 8 to 12%, because $5,000 to them is nothing compared to their annual expenditures. Now, some of our smaller school districts are definitely closer to the 20 to 25% range. So yes, smaller schools, in my opinion, definitely have to keep a higher percentage of their annual expenditures in that fund balance, unreserved fund balance, because it doesn't go as far as some of the Blaines or Moorheads or larger districts.
Anyone else? Anything else for us?
Yeah.
Crystal, you weren't here, so kudos to you for, sounds
Good
like
job.
the ship's going along smoothly, so. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
Thanks.
And we'll roll into the policy committee.
I think I sent it out in the working session packet. Basically, we only have policy 903, visitors to school districts up for this month. 709 is under further review, as well as 616. But those were the policies that we went over at our last meeting. Any questions on any of the policies that are up?
I was trying to remember, because like I say, my computer's down. There was one about the movement of a child who's not a school, or not a student at the school. There was a,
I think that's 707.
yeah, does that situation actually come up where you're busing children who aren't students here?
Not here, but some districts it could be, like parochial schools or private schools or something like that.
Okay. It wasn't applicable necessarily to us, it was just a,
No, but I think that's one of the required ones that we have to have.
Would have that applied when you were busing kids over to Rainy River to that daycare?
No, because they were attending.
Because they were attending a program here,
We took.
even though it
We
was like
took-
the ECFE
yeah.
program or whatever. I was just curious about that.
An example would be if you had a Catholic school, for
Mhm.
example, in here, we could bus kids to the private Catholic school, would be an example.
How about if you have a co-opted athletic event with Indus kids being dragged to Bagley? Is that,
That's more under your activities type transportation.
They would be considered our kids because they're participating in our teams for the most school.
okay.
That was, I was thinking that same thing. How, and if they were homeschooled, the same thing,
Same
right?
thing, yeah.
Anything else? Okay, we'll move on to the Finance Committee.
I'm sharing with Sam.
That's okay. I just lost mine.
You want to
Finance committee? I
speak
don't know,
on that?
We didn't
The-
talk a lot of budget.
No, yeah, we talked about lots of other things. But the June 30th, 2019 numbers are final.
Yep.
Now that all the adjustments have been made pursuant the audit. And I don't know, that's all.
That's about it.
Yeah.
We're okay now, the audit guy's gone.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
That was a tight one.
Kind of going with the audit, but not to give Crystal too big of a head, but most of the Finance Committee meetings have been pretty darn boring, which is a good thing.
Knock on wood. Yeah. So yeah, that's all we talked about. Nothing else really to report there.
All right, any questions, other? We'll move on to World's Best Workforce Advisory Committee.
I think you're the only board member that made it.
I think I was, and Jeff provided the same documentation in your board packet as was provided at the meeting. We had some good discussion, and I think he's included most of the information that people had, the board members had requested, so if there's not any other questions on that.
Or is there information or data that the board would like to see different as far as academics? You'll notice the biggest change, some of the biggest changes from last year is we've started including more of our district assessment or benchmark assessments. So we're just not reporting just on the state assessment. We're reporting on FastBridge, which is something that we give in the fall, in the winter, and then in the spring. So it's a little more user, or more applicable to the classroom teachers because it's more timely. Whereas the state assessment's done in the spring and we really can't touch the results till end of August, early September. So that's added some information in here, so.
The other new information is the cohort information, isn't it? It's cohort. Following those cohorts. Was that in last
yeah.
year?
A lot of
And we talked about
Yep.
it, but
it added a little bit of confusion if you look at some of the charts and stuff, but we try to look more at cohort groups because especially in a small district, if you're looking just at your reading scores for grade 3, every year you have a new group of kids coming through. And it's very hard to project what the new group is going to be. So we're more looking at how is that cohort moving through and what is our impact on them.
Over what, a 6-year span or?
No.
You only have a measure of 3 years the way they take the test, right?
Well, the reading test is 3rd through 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and 10th grade. The math is K through 8 and 11th grade for the state assessment. So I guess if you set your I guess what we're trying to look at is, your 4th or 5th grade goals should be based on that cohort group, because it doesn't make sense to measure if you.
Right, you have a whole classroom of different abilities showing up
Yes,
every
and you
year.
might have a large group of kids, or you might have a small class. And in a small class, if you have 15 kids in there and 4 of them are well below grade level, that skews your results. And that's why you see this. So we're trying to look at more on the impact we're having on each group as they go through. But I'd be happy to bring back more testing information, or if there's questions or things that the board wants to see as far as academics. And you can think over the holiday. If something comes to mind, you can let me know.
All right, anyone else? Any more questions? And we'll go to the MSEA negotiations.
I can't remember the date we met.
December 5th.
Well, there we go.
That
And
took
we're
me a while to
meeting
figure that
again
one out, too.
on January 7th and January 21st. We set dates. That was the only days that would work, so.
Yeah, we're doing the back and forth right now, so.
Right.
That's about all we can tell you, so. Moving right along. Superintendent Elementary Principal Report.
Okay, enrollment report indicates that we're down 5 students from the beginning of the year, but I know we just had another high school student enroll today, so we're about at 486. Strategic.
Before you jump past that, his number, it doesn't include that preschool number that we've sort of added to the.
Yeah, this is gonna be a little different because we're counting heads here. With the ADM for the BPK, they only count for 0.6. So you don't get to count the whole kid.
Do his numbers reflect that 0.6 of a kid?
Yep.
When he does that total? Okay.
Yep. Any other questions with enrollment?
Sorry.
That's all right. That's a good question. Update, not as long of a list, but we're still making progress on the different objective areas. And I'm planning in January or February, kind of coming up, I think that's the date we set for kind of a superintendent summary report on my evaluation, and that'll include kind of an update on the strategic plan. January calendar. The only thing I didn't put in here that we'll need to set during the regular meeting, so you can be thinking about your calendar, is our organizational meeting needs to be set in January. So that'll be another meeting that we'll have to add. And then I sent you information on the 4th grade proposal. Any questions on that? I guess
That, why would it end on May 15th?
Because when you look at all the calendar events and the field trips and all that stuff, the last couple of weeks are not the most academic. So I'm trying to get the most bang for our buck as far as the academic targeted services. And I think that's the way to reduce the cost. 'Cause. 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 ' That's why I kind of went with the May 15th.
And the same as the January start date, I suppose that would be.
Well, with advertising for
Is
the
that-
position and trying to fill it.
Right, it'll take
yeah,
that long.
It just made sense to get someone started.
Well, and I couldn't remember when the semester ended either.
The end of that week.
Okay.
So we can get them started in the classroom on the 13th.
Mm-hmm.
But reporting out to the parents, the teacher now would be in charge of all the classes.
But that person could maybe assist, so they would get to know some of the students a little.
Yep, we'll start the split in the instruction. Usually
Uh-huh.
the week before the end of the semester, a lot of stuff is wrapped up. We have a lot of classes.
On that fourth grade class, does that all the fourth graders are in one classroom?
Currently, yes.
And how many students is that?
23.
20,
23.
23.
It's 23 or 24.
Is that an action item that we have to direct you to do that, or is it we just nodding our heads on that?
I wrote it up, so it could be an action item. But technically, if the board is okay with it, I'll move ahead and advertise. And then in January, the January board meeting, I would just have the board approve the hire.
Yeah, we do the official hiring.
Yep.
I think that's that caveat statement we throw out in January, isn't it, where we say we direct the superintendent to cut or, add as needed, right?
And so you said we would be deficit spending in
Yeah.
order to make this happen.
Yep, right now, that's the way it stands.
Is this something that you?
Is there something we could shave a little bit here and there, or there might be some cost savings that we can't anticipate, but right now, our revenues and expenditures that we can anticipate, I mean, we just haven't budgeted for it, and I don't think there's anything right now. We can definitely say we will have more revenue, or we can cut these expenditures, but.
And looking at next year, I mean, assuming this position would carry through?
Yeah, I was gonna the exact same thing for fifth grade.
Well, we talked about budgeting just for a full-time position, but that could be adjusted. So if we gain a few more kids, that would be justified. If we lose 3 or 4 more kids, so I don't want to lock us into having 2 sections, but I think when we start budgeting for it, we would plan the budget around that scenario.
We might get symptoms that improve too, just with the course of the next 6 months. I mean, is that reasonable to expect?
And maybe you've said this and I just am not remembering, but there's a para in the room right now.
There is.
And that will stay or not?
We'll adjust the para assignment as needs. We prioritize students on IEPs that have the service minutes. So that person will be available part of the day for sure for 4th grade. So yes and no. Well, there might be some adjustment if there's 10, 12 kids in the class, depending on which kids they are. We'll determine if there's a para in there or not.
For this year, though, the para would continue, do you think?
That position would, yes. We're anticipating another student on an IEP that is enrolling. It'll be starting after the new year.
Come March, April, and we haven't seen favorable results, other ideas that are out there?
Hopefully I'll have better ideas like in February, March, if it's not working.
Okay.
I think we're doing some of that information, didn't go into great detail as far as some of the intervention and supports that we have in place. In addition to just the para being in there, we have the school social worker doing social emotional learning. We have our title, we have Read 180. I mean, so there's lots of things that we are doing. And this is just one more add-on to it.
Sure.
I think it'll help address some of our issues, but I don't think it's going to eliminate all of our concerns.
I thought that chart was pretty,
Telling.
Yeah.
Tell us, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. It was like, wow.
Well, fourth grade, we have technically 8 more years of that cohort, to use a term we've used here earlier tonight, but might as well address it, see what we can do.
Yeah.
Make it a good situation. I hope the Lake of the Woods taxpayer understands that that's why we're spending more than we budgeted at this point, trying to make things right.
Okay.
Good
So,
point.
Do
Very
you
good
wanna-
point.
You want to make it a board action to approve this, or I'll just advertise the position and you can approve the hire in January and
Just approve the hire in January. We'll go with the normal method and go ahead and advertise.
Yep.
Boils down to you have to try something because what's there right now obviously isn't ideal.
Yep. And I think last year, just to add a little bit, the dynamics change when kids leave and come in. I mean, the numbers haven't changed, but some of the students have. So there's some different dynamics going on in the classroom that.
Because was it 2 sections last year?
No, it was in one.
It was in one.
Yeah, but we
yeah.
had some kids leave the district and some kids come in and, so. The next thing I have on my list is the staff celebration out at Ballard's on Wednesday. If you're interested, I have a sign-up sheet. Let me know before you leave what you want to have. You're all invited. I think we have and that's considered a teacher that has 3 years teaching experience, or more than 3 years. And it has Lake of the Woods. The next column is compared to high poverty districts. And then the next column is educators in low poverty districts. And the information that the state has is that we're at 43.27%, so we're kind of not necessarily a high poverty district, and we're not a low poverty district. We're kind of in the middle. So our percent experienced teachers is 82% roughly. In high poverty districts across the state, it's 79%. And in low poverty districts statewide, it's 88%.
Yeah.
So we kind of fall right in the middle
I
there.
thought that was pretty interesting. On almost every point all the way through, we're right in the middle.
Yep, yep. The only exception was, where was it?
The ethnically diverse teaching
Yes,
staff.
Yeah.
so you got the section on the poverty, then you have the section on the ethnicity piece of it, and the data's kind of the same. Except for which one was it? Oh, percentage of educators with advanced degrees. Lake of the Woods is at 33.33%. Educators in districts with high populations of students of color was at 54%. And educators in districts with low population of students of color was 44%. So that was kind of an anomaly with the trends. So then the rest of the report just kind of has a breakdown of our staff demographics. Any questions on them? I've met my state requirement to publicly report out on that information, so. And then the last thing I have is, and I didn't send out an email, but this is for meet and confer, and I believe it's Mr. Lyon and Mr. Burcham that are on that committee. I've gotten from Education Minnesota at this time, they don't have any issues to bring it for meet and confer for a mid-year meeting. And I will respond back unless there's something that the board has any issues. You can talk to one of your board representatives or myself if you think there's something that we want to bring from this side of the table for meet and confer.
But by contract, we have to offer up the possibility of a meeting.
Yep,
And if they decide to defer on it till spring, that's
yep.
their choice.
So I will just, unless there's some issue, I will just do a formal email to them stating that we can meet on this date. Unless there's nothing, then they don't have anything to bring, so.
Okay.
Which is not all, it's not good news from my perspective, but at this point, that's all I have unless you have any questions or anything for me.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right, moving right along. Go to Crystal. Okay. Activities Director?
Not a whole lot, just all of our sports are up and running. I'm pretty quiet.
Good. Any questions for Mr. Hazelton? All right, Buildings and Grounds.
I'm just kind of getting ready to go into Christmas break and the projects we're going to take advantage of with schools empty. One of them being refinishing the multi-gym floor, which has been put off for quite a few years and it's overdue. So we're going to take advantage of the time and get it done.
Okay, any questions? And Community Ed and Transportation Director.
In terms of the buildings and grounds, I saw somebody plowing with a Bobcat out on that, the school forest apron.
Yep.
Just in preparation for the potential for use for
Overflow parking.
overflow parking, okay.
That's something that I got to get with Sam and address, that a lot of people don't know that's there.
Yep.
So they're parking kind of all over the place. So we're going to look at
Yep.
possible portable signage to get it up there, overflow parking, so people know they can park closer there, where to drop off the kids in the back. So we can kind of eliminate or make it a lot, instead of driving all the way around, make it a little more easier for schools that are visiting, kind of know where everything is. And where the parking is.
Thanks for doing that. And I think that first game sort of illustrated exactly what we were concerned about. The parking lot was full, brimming full, but if anything else had been going on, a basketball game or something, it would have been a tight fit in there.
Absolutely right. That was something that was addressed a while ago, but we had to wait for the ground to freeze enough before we opened it up. Otherwise, it would just create a nightmare. So they should be good to go now.
Okay.
Anything else? All right, Community Ed and Transportation.
For transportation, just one thing, we're planning on consolidating a bus route after Christmas break. So Tina and Richard's route, the old route she left, we're gonna create one route out of that and move kids into other routes. So we'll experience some cost savings there, but most importantly, we're gonna free up another driver, sub-driver, with Tina leaving, kind of put us in her tank for sub-drivers. It
So
also helps with
It's
the-
more because of lack of drivers than lack of students on two routes or something?
That plays a part in. Also, there wasn't a lot of kids on each of those buses, and it's a really good time to consolidate and save some money. Where we don't have to tell an employee that, sorry, you don't have a bus to drive anymore. So I think that's another big part for me. It's just good timing. Any questions on that?
You have an estimated date when you're gonna start that?
Right after Christmas break, so that Thursday.
Second?
Yep.
And
Which one?
will it extend routes for some kids or significantly or overall? How do you fit?
Time on a bus, right?
Right.
Is that what you're,
Right,
yeah.
and then just notifications to families.
It'll be for the notification part, it'll be just like at the beginning of the year, where the driver calls parents up and says, this is when for us to be at your place. but it's not going to drastically change the bus types.
So where did these two bus routes run? And where will they be running? I mean, well, they'll still be running one bus in this, but what areas? Like, did you say town?
There's a few kids in town, yep. And I think when the routes were created, our student population was a lot bigger. So these routes are made to pick up some kids part of the rural, and then they come to town and fill up their bus in this section of town. So kind of by the hospital and care center there, we've got 3 buses that are driving through that area. Or it's kind of a waste because none of the 3 are full. We don't need to send all 3 there. You can get away with 2. The routes that we're changing up is the Norris Camp route, and that goes Norris Camp and comes up through Roosevelt and picks up south of Pitt a few kids. And that same route, we have at least one other bus covering those same tracks. And with Tina's route, she was south of Pitt and then a little bit south of Grayston. So we're going to pretty much take a little bit off Jen Wilmer's route and have one bus go from south of Williams to south of Grayston, south of Pitt. So we won't have to have a bus cross the tracks there, which is another big issue, especially with Reed. I've kind of talked to him through this process with it as well. And then it's going to be another chance to kind of balance out Georgie's route, where before her current route right now is about 2 hours, 15 minutes. And both of these should be right around hour, 50 minutes.
So does this eliminate the need for one bus, or do the buses still work out the same?
It's going to eliminate the need for a bus, yes.
Okay.
So we're going to save some miles on this change.
About $11,000 worth.
I was already thinking. Here's my 4th grade teacher.
Hey.
Any more questions on the buses, bro?
Sounds like a positive change.
I think so. For community ed, the driver's ed saga has got some closure to it. Brian Denault's going to come starting March 2nd through the 17th. And he's going to teach the classroom portion of the class. And then he's going to come starting the 3rd week of June and do the behind the wheel portion of the class. And we're going to offer both portions for $350. And we're going to have a minimum of 15 students, which I don't think will be a problem at all. I think we'll probably be closer to 30. And this also leaves us a little bit of room for to cover, because we're going to have to install a passenger brake on a vehicle. And we have an Impala that's no longer able to be Type 3. So that'd be a perfect vehicle for driver's ed, and we can make enough money, I think, to at least be close this year to install that brake and buy some equipment, and then potentially maybe make a few dollars off this going forward.
You said he's starting when? March
2nd.
And that's how many weeks?
It's 2 full weeks and then 2 days.
Okay.
The last 2 days are makeup days, because I think it's 30 hours are required. But if a kid gets sick or something comes up, he builds in 2 days just in case. So if every kid shows up, then it would be done 2 days early.
And this is just like hopefully it's just one time per year he would offer it?
Yeah.
Is Brian running that personally, or is that going through the Warroad School Community Ed?
That is, well, it would be like what's community ed.
It'd be through,
Yep.
Okay.
It's the driving force, but and he would be basically
Got it.
contract through us.
For the behind the wheel part, because my daughter happens to fall in that category where she's in the limbo. So can the kids who are in that have only the behind the wheel part, or would they have had to have had the classroom at the same time?
The way it's structured right now is if it would be, you can just do behind the wheel, but we would need the $350 total,
Okay,
if that answers your question.
sort of.
Like if you have your card saying that you went through the classroom, you don't have to go back.
But you kind of
Unless
get
it's
dinged
expired.
on the.
Yeah, you get dinged on the
get
price.
Dinged on the price, right?
Right,
Yeah.
and there's a reason, he had talked about, homeschool students. They have an opportunity to get their classroom portion done, but it affects, kind of how the instructors are billed or paid based on how much.
Yeah.
Pretty much they do that so the school district doesn't end up taking a loss.
Would something be able to be done for this 1 year? Because this isn't through the fault of the family's kids or anything, and I'm sure there's other families in the exact same situation. So it just ended up that that's how it happened.
Potentially, the biggest thing is making sure, Brian gets paid.
Yep.
There probably could be something we could do this year, but I think after this year, when.
Yeah, and that would
last
make
year's kind
sense.
of cleared up, we're gonna wanna be consistent with.
Because when they complete the class, like when they completed, she completed the class with Barry.
Yep.
Like I think you paid a half.
Half.
Then and half when they did behind the
Exactly.
wheel, but she would have a certificate, right? Saying
Yep.
if you have the documentation saying you've completed the
Yep, the card.
classroom.
Yep. Yep, you have the card showing that that was completed.
And the whole thing behind that is the homeschool students.
Yep.
That's.
Nope, that's fine. It's just, again, if mine's the only kid, then don't bother doing anything. But I'm guessing there's gotta be other kids, families in the exact same situation.
Everybody that did the classroom that time is
Yep,
Yeah.
going someplace or finding someplace to do the behind the wheel.
yep. So if it's something that could be accommodated, it would be nice.
We'll just have to look at the numbers on it and try to get that for you next month.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions under Representative?
Good job getting it sorted.
Yeah.
Kind of a long, messy road to it, but, last thing I have is, we got our community basketball started, and we have, 6 travel teams in grades 3 through 6 this year. And, I'm not too sure on the numbers yet. We went to, online registration, and that's pretty difficult for some. It's the same, Chad forced me to do it. It's the same registration as junior high and high school students. But I think all in all, our numbers are pretty good for youth basketball. That's all I got. If there's any more questions.
Anyone? Anything? All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Brett.
We'll go on to food service, but I don't see Cece. Anybody standing in for her? Is there anything to report? Okay. All right, in that case. Anybody need a break or anything? All right, in that case, we'll close the working session and we'll call the regular meeting to order.
To the flag. United States of America. To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We had that at 7:17. I need approval of the agenda. I need a motion and a second. We'll go through the agenda with the following corrections. The addition of Brian Sather, I always forget, is it Sather? Head football coach under appointments. What does under appointments mean?
It's just under that appointments category.
It's under.
Oh,
personnel.
got it.
Personnel.
I thought it was some phrase terminology. That's what you call reading too much into it. Okay, the addition of Cookie Day invitation under written communications. Policy 709, Student Transportation Safety Policy, has been tabled by the Policy Committee and removed from the first reading. The addition of contract agreements for professional services agreement with Northland Counseling Center under new business. I need a motion and a second.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Sonstegard,
I'll second that.
second by Ellis. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Need approval for the consent agenda. Will be approval of the minutes, approval of invoices and statements, personnel resignations, retirements, and appointments. And the resignations are Taylor Natala, okay, paraprofessional, and Melinda Castillo, paraprofessional. Appointments. Oh, you're gonna have to tell me yes.
Alstacia.
Alstacia McLeod, paraprofessional. Jennifer Stokey, paraprofessional. Sandra Wizik, paraprofessional. And Brian Sathry. Say aye. Souther. Yeah, beef. Head football coach. Yep, that covers everything. Need a motion and a second.
I would make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Motion by Lyon,
I'll second.
second by Sonstegard. Any further discussion?
Did, has the second one, the appointments are Jennifer Stokey, did not she work for us before?
Yes.
And we've had history there, or?
Yes, I can send out more information.
And that's the same position that she was, that she's,
It's a little bit different position.
Any more discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
right,
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Board presenters, none. Written communications, 2020 MREA Board of Directors election.
So we need one form filled out for the board. There's one that goes to the teachers group, and then one goes to administration. And that's in the pile here. I believe there's only one candidate, unless we have somebody sitting here that we want to write in. So basically, it's just going through the motions of that piece of it.
Okay. Region 1 Joint Powers Board election.
Same thing as, he already gave it to me. So if you want to cast the ballot, I know we've brought this up before, we don't always know the candidates, but do not vote for more than 4 people, and there's 4 people listed, so.
It sounds like a moot point.
Yeah, so. If someone wants to vote, I will put the postage on it and send it to them. But
All right. Lake of the Woods Employee Christmas Party invite.
okay, you're all invited.
Ballard's on Wednesday.
Wednesday, 6 o'clock. Let me know what you want before you leave. There's several menu options to choose from.
Very good. Thank you very much for the invite. Cookie Day invitation. Emily Pearson.
Yep, and that was in your packet, and it's on the 19th,
18th.
18th?
Oh, no, 19th, you're right.
I don't have it in front of me.
That would be Thursday.
Yes, I believe it's Thursday.
Yes, Thursday.
And that's in the Family and Consumer Science room. So the kids do a lot of baking, and you can stop in there throughout the day, and they have coffee and hot chocolate and cider and cookies, and hang out with the kids if you have time, and they're free to come in.
Okay, very good. Old business. We will be doing the third reading and adoption of the following policies. Policy 414, mandated reporting. Policy 601, curriculum and instruction. Policy 613, graduation requirements. Policy 620, credit for learning. Policy 721, uniform grant guidance. Policy 802, obsolete equipment. Need a motion and a second.
I'd make a motion to approve the third reading of those policies.
I'll second
Motion by
it.
Lyon, second by Bertram. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. I need a motion and second for the second reading of the following policies. Policy 701, transportation of public school students. Policy 602A, Lake of the Woods School Emergency Weather-Related Closing.
Okay, I'm gonna make a
Motion by
to
Lyon,
do that.
Second it.
second by Bertram. We're on a roll. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. On to new business. I need a motion and a second to approve the final property tax levy.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Ellis,
Second by Lyon.
second by Lyon. Any discussion? All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. I need a motion and a second to set the organizational meeting date and time. What date and time do we want?
Historically, a morning meeting.
Want to come back on the 2nd or the 3rd, or wait for the following week?
Let's go for it. You guys all around?
Go with the 3rd to be safe.
So Friday the 3rd?
Yeah.
Yep.
7:30?
Yep.
And if doesn't
January
show up, usually ends up being the chair, so.
January
At
3rd.
7:30 or at 7?
That was usually at 7.
Yeah, I think.
He's
well,
trying
it
to
doesn't last that long, but
Try to sleep in for another half hour.
7:30?
I mean, it's 7:30, I mean, that's okay with me, I just,
It really doesn't make any difference to me.
it's about a 10,
7:30 is
15 minute
okay
meeting,
with
right?
you?
Yeah,
I liked 7:30 better.
All right.
let's go for 7:30.
I like 9:30 better.
Yeah,
Okay. I'll be there.
yeah, these retired people. Okay, we'll go over it again. Okay, to set the organizational meeting date is January 3rd at 7:30 in the morning.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Ellis,
I'll second.
second by Sonstagard. Any more discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Need a motion second to approve the final audit report year end June 30th, 2019.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Bertram,
I'll second that.
second by Ellis. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. I need a motion and a second to approve the first reading of policy 903, visitors to school district buildings and sites.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Trask,
Second by Lyons.
second by Lyon. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. I guess all opposed, same sign. Now it carries unanimously, unless there's opposition in there. Motion and a second to approve the disposal of obsolete IT equipment.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Bertram,
I'll second.
second by Sonstagard. Discussion? How are we gonna get rid of it? We'll give it to the kids, I think was in the policy first, and then, I don't know, are they gonna,
Yeah.
That's a good question.
There's a policy regarding that, I think.
yeah, we just
thought it
passed
had
it.
to go up for sale.
Yeah, I can't remember
Offer it
it,
up for
but,
sale or something before you give it away, and then you have to
yeah.
pay for it to be
I-
disposed of.
Policy 802.
Yep,
Yeah.
I think it, as I
Now we can use it, right?
recall, it might be vice versa,
That was good. That was
where they
good.
look at
You're
giving it
good.
to needy students
Yeah.
and then sell it.
Was that the order?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, as I recall from the policy.
I just
Which-
remember reading it once.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a policy on it, we might as well.
Pull it out.
We will be following the policy no matter what it is.
And if
Why
it
is it
doesn't
in there as a
work,
new
then we
business
need to-
item and not a policy item?
We did the third reading, obsolete equipment, and then it transitions nicely into getting rid of the obsolete IT equipment. So we did the third reading a few minutes ago.
Right.
And we used it, we're using it right now.
Okay. So invoke policy 802 is what
Yep.
we're saying in that motion.
So, yeah, any more discussion? All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Need a motion second to approve the contract agreement for professional services agreement with Northland Counseling Center under new business.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Bertram,
Second by Lyon.
second by Lyon. Any discussion on that?
How many people are we thinking we're gonna be here, Jeff? Two, at least?
They have hired one person. They're planning to start on the January 20th, and they're still advertising, and they might have a couple candidates for the CTSS position. So it's the mental health provider position, and then there's the CTSS position. So it's two different positions. One's more of a therapeutic type. And then the CTSS person would work under the psychologist.
Where are we thinking about housing them? What part of the school?
We're still fighting over space, but we have a couple of empty offices that I think we can use. We just have to figure out which one is most appropriate. So some of the strategy lessons that CTSS person, once they hire that, there's actually the old title and a half room that we're looking at for that. It'll depend on who they're servicing, and where they would be best. So we had a couple ideas on which is most appropriate.
Good.
Any more discussion?
I think it would be covered under this exceptions, surplus of computers.
We're digressing back to the previous. That's okay.
All right, past that.
Any further discussion on the contract? All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Any other business? Going once?
I have one thing. I left Mr. Novak off the
Just fantastic.
off the working session.
Liked how he was being real quiet back there. Hoping he wouldn't get noticed.
I'm getting a lot of work done.
So I don't know if you want to recognize him, if he has anything for the board. Just don't want anyone to be left out.
Got anything for the board?
I actually have one thing. Last Wednesday, we had it was Don Castle from EMS, Bobby Joe Castle from Lakewood School and EMS, and myself. We went to Bemidji for a basically emergency management in schools workshop. And it was the first time in the state of Minnesota that this company actually came down, or came over. There's a guy from Atlanta, a guy from Ohio, and a lady from San Diego, and it was a perfect day. It was like 18 below zero. So we had a good long talk about ice fishing for a while. But it was a great workshop. There was a variety of schools. Anoka Hennepin was there. They had mentioned that one of their elementary schools is 27 feet away from railroad tracks. So it was, the discussion was, are we ready? We run the drills, we get everything set up, we administratively, working with law enforcement, working with hospitals, working with everybody, but are we set up? And we went through a variety of scenarios, and it was an excellent workshop. We've got some interesting things I was showing a few people today, how to do the assess. So you can actually site assess your building and take a look at all the different things. So for example, Mr. Nelson and I could walk outside and we could walk and take a look at all the different surroundings, whether it's the trees or whether it's the parking lot or whether it's a building. Do we have any doors that should be changed? We take the handles off the doors if you don't want them used from the outside. But there's so many different things that you can do. And it was a really, really good workshop. And it was a variety, like I said, it was a variety of people. There were superintendents there, there were principals there were emergency managers there were facilities managers there from a variety of schools. So it was about close to about 125 people that were there.
I know a few years ago, we did the countywide drill with the school bus accident, and it'd be interesting. Maybe have another one of those or similar scenario or something, and we're not 27 feet away from the railroad tracks, but we're definitely in the vicinity, so that's something to contemplate as well. Any more questions? Going once, going twice. Adjourned at 7:35.
Just waking up.